welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I'm, of course, your host, Rob Burgess. On this, our 85th episode, our guest is Maureen Mulheren. Maureen Mulheren is a born and raised Ukiah, California kid turned accidental politician. Mo has 2 local businesses. She sells insurance and she does marketing for other local businesses. When she saw a need to step up and take a leadership role in her community, she ran for a seat on the Ukiah City Council. You can find out more by visiting her webpage at www.maureenmulheren.com. That's MaureenMulheren.com. Or find her on her Facebook page, which you can find by searching Maureen Mo Mulheren Ukiah City Council. And as you'll hear later in the episode, if you want to donate to the victims of the recent wildfires, you can also find the Community Foundation of Mendocino County at www.communityfound.org. And now on to the show.
Hello, this is Mo.
Hey Mo, it's Rob.
Hey Rob, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. I am so sorry. I totally forgot about our meeting at 10 o'clock. I am available to talk, Joe, and
cool.
Hopefully nobody yells at me.
Okay, well, if they do, we can always stop and restart. It's okay. Yeah, so for people that don't know who you are, go ahead and introduce yourself here.
Okay, so my name is Maureen Mulheren from Ukiah, California, the best place on earth.
And so you have many titles, of course. The Mo you know is, of course, the one everyone knows you by first. But what are some of the things that people would know you from title-wise here?
Well, so I am a local insurance agent, and I also own a marketing business, Ukiah Valley Networking Agency. And I'm on the Ukiah City Council, so a lot of local people know me from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I knew you before you were on the city council, but it definitely didn't surprise me when I heard you were running and then won, because it seemed like you were kind of headed in that direction. And actually, before I knew that, I actually had known about your father from the paper, and he's very active in local politics and pretty outspoken. So I imagine with growing up with him, it was probably a natural thing that you'd want to get involved in politics, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah. I know people all the time are like, what made you get into this? I'm like, well, it wasn't really a choice. So I think I probably went to my first planning commission meeting when I was in junior high. Uh-huh. And, my dad ran for city council. He also ran for board of supervisor, and he was the president of the North Coast Builders Exchange and president of the Chamber of Commerce. So my whole life, I grew up with having an involved family in local politics. So it was my goal to run for city council when I was 37, when I was 27, so that was my 10-year goal. But when 2014, when the election came around, there were 2 seats that the incumbents weren't running for. So there were 3 open seats. 1 incumbent ran again, and there were 8 people that ended up running for those 3 seats. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and once you actually kind of threw your hat in the ring, what was different between your expectations before you decided to run, and then actually the reality of it? Because once you're in the mix, I'm sure it's a little different.
Oh yeah, no, it was actually pretty hilarious because there were 3 open seats, and so I had sort of asked around with people that I knew were going to run or were already interested, and was like, hey, are you going to run? Are you going to run? Sort of a thing. So I only knew of 1 other person, so I'm like, oh, this is easy. You have the 1 incumbent, you have the 1 guy I already know, and then me, so that's 3 spots, so like no big deal. And then it comes out that there's 8 people for 3 spots. I was like, you guys, I'm trying to do my thing here. Well, you're running against me. Like, give me a break. But it all turned out okay. I didn't really have any expectations of what the election process looked like or what that even meant. So I think we probably did at least 4 debate type forums, like candidate forums, and then we had to write several Q&As for the newspaper. It was actually really involved for what you would think small town city council person would have to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I barely, I won by 24 votes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I remember it being a pretty slim margin there. It was kind of down to the wire. So I guess every little thing counts, right?
Yeah, every single vote counts, especially in a small local election like that, for sure.
Right, definitely. And now that you've been on the job for a few years, what have been some of the things that you haven't expected that have kind of taken up more of your time? I'm sure there's a lot of detail-oriented stuff that you've had to get involved in now that you're actually doing the job. So
yeah, I think that one of the most challenging things for me is just how long it takes for things to happen, how slow the process is. I've been on some I've been on the cannabis ad hoc for 2 years, and we're just now really moving forward with the auxiliary business ordinance, and we still haven't even talked about recreational cannabis in Ukiah. So that's one of the things that's been interesting. But I am also, I think the sheriff called me type A. Like, I research a lot when I'm about to when I'm about to make a decision. I don't just show up and start checking boxes. I do a lot of research about what's going to be best, and that's probably been more time consuming than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, you really do get into the details, and of course I'm Facebook friends with you, so I always watch your Facebook Live videos that you do. And has that been a good way to kind of communicate with the constituents there? I imagine that's kind of a newer thing that local politicians haven't really had to do in the past, but I think that's probably a good way to get in touch with people, because that's kind of where people are, is Facebook and things like that. So
yeah, I think that having social media and being pretty good at connecting with people through social media has totally helped me make decisions, because most people, they get off of work, they go home, maybe they have to take their kids to soccer or some other sport or art or whatever it is, and people just don't like meetings. They don't want to come to a meeting. So if I can throw out a question or get some feedback from people on social media, then I definitely use that as a tool, because sometimes I call myself the voice of the rest of us. So not the 5 people that come to the city council meeting about the same subject every time. Like, I'm the voice of the people that aren't there because they are at soccer, because they are, working 2 jobs and that sort of thing. So I pride myself on being able to get feedback from the community in various ways. I also do a monthly coffee meeting at Black Oak Coffee, which is a super awesome local coffee shop. And people can come and talk to me about whatever they want. So if there's a hot topic, they'll come and talk about that. Or if they just want to come and sit and chat and talk about whatever's happening in Ukiah. I also go to the Meet the Editor meeting with Casey Meadows at Shots, and that's Thursday mornings at 7. So there's always somebody different there that wants to talk about maybe a fundraiser that they're having or an issue that they have with local government or whatever it is. I definitely hear from people by doing that. And then I also do a monthly community walk on the rail trail. And so I'll often have a chance to talk to people while doing that. We just had one for Halloween. We do Witches and Wheels. And so people dress up like witches and we go for a walk, and, we could talk about the courthouse project or what's happening with the Grace Hudson Museum, what's happening with the extension of the rail trail. So I'm also, just out there enough that people feel comfortable enough to come into my office and talk to me or call me or send me an email. So, yeah, I think I get a lot of community feedback besides from people actually showing up at a meeting, if that makes sense.
Right. And when is the next time you'll have to run for office here? Next year or?
Next year, yeah, 2018. Okay. It's a 4-year seat.
I see. So is that something you've already started your campaign for, or?
Well, I definitely plan on running again. So I guess maybe just that it's out there that I know that I will be doing it. So Yeah, I haven't really started a campaign per se. I was telling my dad, my signs all said 2014. He's like, you should have got them that didn't say the actual the year on them. And I was like, wow.
Just slice off the bottom part or something, I guess.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But how have you had to, I'm sure, you're a small business owner, like you said, you're on the city council, you have a family, you have all these different hats you wear. Has it been hard to juggle all those different responsibilities now that you've been, in the public eye like this?
I mean, honestly, sometimes I have a 19-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old daughter, and the 19-year-old has a career in real estate, and she's, sort of off doing her own thing. But the 7-year-old is, sometimes she's like, we have to go to another meeting, we have to do another event. Like, why can't we just hang out like normal people? Like, oh, well, your mother's not normal, honey, so this is what we're gonna do. I think she went to her first Chamber of Commerce meeting when she was like 5 days old. So, she's pretty used to it, but sometimes she does, ask for a little more attention to not have to be at some type of event.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and so part of the reason I wanted to talk to you now is that you guys just got done having those horrible fires, and I used to live in Ukiah, and I was there during the lightning complex fire, so I remember how bad that was. But how did that compare to this time, and what were some of the differences?
Well, I think really the loss of life has been devastating for our community. So even though Santa Rosa definitely had bigger losses, we are smaller. And so even, the people that have passed away, I think, has really been impactful in our community. I mean, the stories of people escaping the fire, it just happened so quickly, have been so sad to hear, how much that those people had to go through. Of course, we're all grateful that they made it through, but it was, I think, much larger and much more impactful than any fire that we've had around here. And it's a little sad because we're getting, I'm trying to choose the right word. It's, Santa Rosa is definitely bigger than us, or definitely had more loss, but at the same time, like, we are a smaller community, so we're a little tighter wound. And I think we're also probably less wealthy, so some of those folks that lost their house didn't have insurance, and that's super hard then for them to have to figure out what their next plan is. Some that did have insurance didn't have. So around here, we definitely have a housing shortage as it is. So some of the people that lived in River Valley had a pretty sweet deal as far as what they were getting for rent. You know what I mean? And so now there's nowhere else where they can go find that kind of, price or the amount of land that they had before, or that sort of thing. And so it's sort of flipped the way that the housing around here has worked. And I think it will be interesting in comparison to the Valley fires in Lake County 2 years ago to see how many people stay and rebuild and how many people move on. I think it's around close to 400 families lost their homes in between River Valley and Potter Valley and Willits. And so I think, maybe some of the people that were on the fence and they were already going to go to Montana or Idaho or Texas will probably take their insurance money and do that. And it will be interesting to see if people from Santa Rosa relocate to Mendocino County, because they may not even, I just read an article, they may not even rebuild that Fountain Grove area. I guess it's the second time they've had a fire in the last 50 years or so. And so they're looking at, hey, is this even a good idea? What are we doing? How are we going to rebuild here? So it's going to be a really interesting shift, I think, in the cultures between what happens in Mendocino County, what happens in Sonoma County, because we are so closely, geographically we're close. So
Yeah, well, you just touched on so many things I wanted to talk about there, but yeah, the one thing I did keep seeing was that Mendocino County kept feeling like they were not being remembered when people were talking about this. All the headlines I would see were Napa, Sonoma, and it's like, well, I've seen that videos of people driving through Redwood Valley and making it by the skin of their teeth, and it just looks like a war zone. And it's like, are we not mentioning this? Like, why is this not important too? So, it just seemed like kind of a gap in the public consciousness there that people don't realize quite how devastating it was. So.
Yeah, and that's hard because part of me is kind of like, I don't want those news crews up here, you know?
For sure, for that reason.
I met one man, they were evacuated, they hadn't been allowed back in, and his wife found out that they had lost their home on the 11 o'clock news. So imagine how devastating that would be to a family that hasn't even been there. He said that they were showing pictures of his house and they hadn't even been allowed back in yet. So to me, that's not the way you want to find out about it.
Absolutely not.
But I think that the really important thing is that our elected officials were here. So whether or not it made it in the news, they were here helping us. Huffman was here, McGuire is here, Jim Wood was here. The fire happened very early Monday morning. They were here by Tuesday, starting to figure out how to get relief funds here, how to get declared a disaster. So sometimes I think maybe most people felt like that we didn't want to be ignored. Some people felt the other way, like, okay, whatever, let them ignore us. We're here. But if you're thinking about, though, like maybe the GoFundMes or the amount of contributions that can come from around the country for people to help, like, I get that. You know what I mean? I see why you would want some. As far as just having news cameras tromping through our devastated, fire, I'm like, I don't know if I need that. That makes sense.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. Now, how bad was the smoke? Because I remember that was the one thing in Ukiah, because it's between, of course, the mountain ranges, and that smoke from the lightning complex fire, I remember just kind of pooled there, and it was just, so like short of breath all the time. And I remember I was walking home from Lucky's one day, and I just had grocery bags in each hand. I was like, I could just take a nap behind this bush. And I'm like, no, Rob, keep walking. This is what happens right before you never come home. So,
right.
But yeah, was the smoke really bad this time too, or?
Yeah, it definitely was. I think that maybe because everything happened so quickly, and because the Valley Fire had happened 2 years ago, I don't want to say we were prepared, but we were more prepared than we would have been if it hadn't been for the Valley Fires, because we learned so much from them. So the county had masks that they were giving out. I think they gave out like 1,000 of the masks for air quality, and they canceled school for a week to keep the kids inside.
Right.
So yeah, we definitely, I think we're more prepared to be able to handle that than we would have been without learning from the Valley Fire.
Right, absolutely. Now, you mentioned that it kind of happened fast. Was that another difference? Because I felt like that was a big thing that people kept saying, was that this just happened. It just happened out of nowhere, it seemed like.
Yeah, I think it was only a few hours before. So as far as I understand, that there was a transformer that blew, and the wind had been so bad that it just swept the fire so quickly. And yeah, there were people that were not registered on the Nixle system. There were people that, lived pretty far remotely. So they definitely didn't really have much of a warning. People were driving, as they were driving out, they were honking horns and trying to wake people up, because that was the other thing, is the middle of the night. So, of course, if it happened during the day, probably the majority of the people would have already been in town at work. So it definitely caught people unaware, which, as hard as it is, sometimes it takes a disaster to be prepared. It's kind of interesting because I think it was the month before this fire happened, 3 weeks or so, the city and the county had a disaster preparedness workshop, and I went, and there were like 6 people there, right? Because we just already talked about nobody likes to go to meetings.
Sure.
But I was thinking, as I'm sitting there, like, you guys, Texas is flooded. Like, we have to be able to take care of ourselves if something happens. And nobody was there. But I think that I have heard that there are more people that are signing up to be volunteer firemen. We have CERT, so that's another volunteer organization, or the Sheriff's Search and Rescue. People are signing up to be volunteers. So I think sometimes a disaster kind of encourages you or spurs you on to be like, oh yeah, I should take those classes. I should get involved. I should be ready.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And then you, like you mentioned, work in insurance, and I'm sure you were working both, your city council responsibilities and your insurance. Were you still able to sign people up for insurance even through that? Or is it too late by the time all that's happening? You got to think ahead, I guess.
Yeah. So what the insurance companies do is they basically lock out a zip code. Ooh. So Redwood Valley got locked out right away, so you couldn't get a new policy. And then Ukiah had some more availability, but then they locked that one out too within like a day, within 24 hours of the fire. So basically, any new policies, there's a moratorium, and you couldn't get a new policy. So I did keep a list, and thankfully, the people that didn't have their houses burned can now get insurance because the fire is technically 100% contained. So they can get insurance. One of the things that's going to be really interesting is it's called an ISO rating, or brush hazard risk in insurance. And so, for instance, if you live next door to the fire department, your risk rating would be a 1. If you live way off in the country in a more remote location, your risk rating would be a 10. So it will be interesting to see what happens with the state of California, and if they re-rate. There were over 200 fires in California burning at the same time as our fire was. So I would anticipate that the insurance, many of the insurance companies will start dropping people. That's what happened after the Valley fire. They were just like, on your next renewal, we're not renewing you. So what I want everybody to know is a lot like how in California you can get insurance through the state if you can't find another company to insure you for your auto insurance. So the same thing happens with the homes. So every home in California can have insurance. It's through a state-required program called California Fair Plan. And it basically covers your home to make sure that you can rebuild if something does happen, because I do anticipate that some of the bigger companies are going to start dropping people in our area, which is a bummer, but there's an alternative. My biggest worry is that there's so many people that don't know about the alternative. They don't know that it's an option. They get that letter that says you can't have insurance, and they're like, oh, well, great. Now what am I going to do? Right. But there's a plan B. There's something else out there for you. The other thing that always gets me is the renter's insurance. Is people just don't think they need it, or they think it might be too expensive, and it's definitely not expensive. It's definitely affordable. So that's my other big championing thing, is get that renter's insurance, be prepared. It'll cover to replace your belongings, and it will also cover what's called loss of use. So it would cover you to stay in a motel or whatever you need to do to find another place. Maybe you need a deposit or something like that. That coverage could cover that. So yeah, that's my other big thing. Right, definitely. So now, is the federal government coming through with any FEMA aid? I know we had some, tornadoes around here, and we lost out on the FEMA money because it was some formula. We didn't meet the, requirements or whatever, but maybe that wouldn't be an issue this time because it was so devastating. But is the federal help coming at all? As far as I know, they are following through with that. I haven't seen. I think maybe some people are getting checks, but I don't know the amounts or exactly how that's working. We also have a local resource. So there's a local assistance center at the college where people can sign up for FEMA, for USDA, and also some other funding. But it's the grant from the local community foundation, I think, that's going to definitely help out our local people. So we're trying to get everybody to encourage people to donate locally. There's a process with which people fill out an application, but basically the money is distributed based on need. So I think that's hopeful than rather, everybody gets a check for the same amount when somebody may not need that much or somebody may need more.
Okay.
That sort of thing.
Right. Now, you mentioned that this is going to change some of the demographics, but how is this going to change, do you think, the local industries? I'm thinking, of course, of wineries first, and foremost. Agriculture is such a big thing in the area. So what has been the effect on the winery business?
Well, one large winery lost the vineyard in a couple of houses, the Fry Vineyard. But what's great about being in such a small local community is that Parducci's reached out right away, and they were able to harvest their grapes and bring them to them to get bottled. So I think that's part of being in a small community, is that you have people that can reach out and help each other. I'm not sure yet how many other or vineyards lost things.
Okay. And what about the marijuana industry? Has it been affected by the fires? I would assume it has.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I haven't seen firm numbers yet, and of course I've only heard anecdotal information, but cannabis is a huge part of our economy here, and it definitely a lot of the people grow in more rural areas like that out Tomkai Road. There's not a lot of traffic, and it's more, your neighbor or that sort of thing. So it really, I think, will have an impact on our economy. And unfortunately, a lot of people didn't know that they could have insurance. So that also, is a bummer. So I do sell cannabis insurance as well. It's like other business insurance. And I had one client call me. She's like, everybody is ripping out their plants. What do I do? I'm like, you do nothing. You leave. You have insurance. Like, don't be there.
Yeah, right. It's not worth it. Just leave.
Yeah, you have insurance. That's what it's for.
Yeah.
So, it's just hard with the changing times, with the licensing requirements and the permitting and everything. Everybody's trying to get, I always say, we're trying to get legit. We're trying to do the right thing and get licensed and get permitted. But there's so much. And I think that people just haven't even gotten to the insurance part yet, frankly. They're just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know why I need that. And unless you, sit down with somebody, insurance doesn't make sense to, I think, pretty much 85% of the population. It's like, why do I need it? And you don't need it until you need it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, now, is the marijuana insurance available there because of the recreational status in California? Is that something that's come about, or is that something from before then?
Yeah, it was definitely before then.
Huh.
So 2010, you could get insurance for your medical cannabis.
Oh, okay.
And, so you've been able to get it for a long time. I didn't hear about it until after Prop 64 passed, and I had actually a rep come in, and he said, hey, I have this product, meaning cannabis insurance. Are you interested? And I was like, yeah. I would much rather have people come in to my office and talk to me than call somebody out of LA or San Francisco that, has no idea what it's like to live up here, doesn't understand. I mean, for some of my clients, I've had to talk to underwriting and be like, no, it's way up a dirt road. Here's the security plan. Nobody even knows where it is. You know what I mean? They know us like we, like if you live around here.
Oh yeah, absolutely, for sure. Now, in general, how has the area been kind of responding to the legalization? I remember when I was there during the whole, Measure B thing and people opposing any kind of regulation. And then I remember when they had the original thing that didn't pass statewide, a lot of people were against that locally. And I guess that was also true this time too, because I know people are worried about, big business coming in and kind of taking out the mom and pop growers or whatever. So how has the local area and Ukiah especially been dealing with this?
I think that we're doing okay, honestly. I mean, maybe there are people that would disagree with me, but I think we have close to 700 people in the permitting process. Mm-hmm. And compared to Sonoma County, where I think they have it's less than 100, I think that our farmers understand and have been waiting to get out of, the black market. They're ready to not be hiding anymore. Actually, I talked to somebody and she's like, when do I get to just say that this is what I do for a living and people won't judge me? And I'm like, I don't know, but hopefully soon. Because, that's the lady from PTA. That's your, cannabis money touches every single thing in Mendocino County.
Absolutely.
And so, I think supporting each other and being there for each other and respecting what those choices is so important, especially in a small town like ours. I was thinking about it today, and just the amount of people that feel like they still have to be shamed, and I think that's so disappointing to me because we shouldn't feel like that in a small town.
Oh, absolutely not. It would be a shame if now that it's coming into the light, if you guys didn't make that transition, because it's been such, on the map for so long when it was more illicit, you know what I mean? So it's like now that it's kind of coming, it's like, well, now it's time to get your due for all the work you've done all these years. So,
right, yeah. To be respected
as,
industry leaders, and, we have world-renowned products from here. People know about the Emerald Triangle, so why are we trying to be shamed or to not feel feel good about that? I don't know. But I think I've seen kind of an interesting shift lately in that conversation, mostly again on social media, but people standing up and saying, hey, leave them alone. They're just they're doing their job just like you're doing your job.
Definitely. Well, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, in the Midwest here, of course, and I'm sure other places, we've had this horrible opioid crisis, and we've had all these pill mills be, popping up and be shut down. I remember the big problem in Ukiah, I remember, was meth at the time, and I'm sure it still is a problem. But how has that touched the local area? Has it gotten that bad around there with the opioids as well, or?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I was just talking to somebody this weekend who has a parent that, got addicted after surgery. So it touches everybody, and especially in small communities. I think that often people are looking for an escape, and so that kind of gets them there sometimes. So it's definitely here as well.
Well, and it seems like you said the people who, go to these doctors, if a doctor prescribes you something, that's, something that people don't think twice about sometimes. And then if they get overprescribed or get hooked, or, you know what I mean, that's, people don't even seem like they mean to sometimes. And next thing you know, they're, they need it, and they're not even to get high. It's just to, because they need it to not feel bad. So it's really a shame. So.
It definitely is, and I think there was a recent case where they actually indicted some of the pharmaceutical companies for fraud and for selling opioids and giving kickbacks and all of that, because it is true. Doctors get money or dinners or whatever it is that they get, just like politicians do. So they should be regulated as well. I mean, at least that's my opinion.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. But for people that want to help, kind of going back to the fires, but for people that in the audience that want to help, what what can people do to contribute and help people get back on their feet there? What's the best way?
I definitely encourage people to donate to the Community Foundation of Mendocino County. That's the one where they do the process of the application, and people get funding based on need.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we have a couple of locations where people can get free stuff. It's just that sometimes people don't want used things.
Mm.
So gift cards are awesome. And the other thing I like about the Community Foundation is that it helps everybody. So GoFundMes are awesome, except for that unless you have somebody that's there supporting you with it, if you know what I mean. Like, there's not a friend that's going to sign you up for a GoFundMe, or you don't have the social media outreach to get a lot of donations. The Community Foundation is there to help everybody, and I really like that.
Right. Yeah, and that's good to point out that those local organizations are the one to focus on, and people forget about some of the practical things that people need after these things. I remember I read a story about how they were trying to get people to donate tampons after Hurricane Harvey, and it's like, you don't think about that kind of stuff, but guess what? People still need that kind of stuff, and it doesn't, the things don't stop happening just because there's a natural disaster, so,
Right.
But anyway.
It's everything.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Well, that's pretty much everything I wanted to ask you about. Is there anything else I didn't ask you about that you wanted to get in there?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, before we go, the last thing I end on every episode is I ask, what music have you been listening to lately?
Oh, I listen to country music. My friends make fun of me. I would love to I think that we need a line dancing place. My friends are like, you need to stop with the country music. I'm like, I love it. My mom listened to it, when she cleaned the house on Sundays, and I don't know, every single song. I'm like, oh, that's my life. My life.
Oh, it's definitely lifestyle music. But as far as what era of country music or artist or whatever do you go for?
Yeah, I like mostly the stuff from the 90s, like the old stuff from when I was a kid that, I just remember hearing those songs, the jazz, and, the old Garth Brooks.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
In high school, man, driving around in trucks. And all that
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I can't hear Friends in Low Places without being, 16 again or whatever. So,
yeah.
But
so true.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It'll be out on Friday, and I'll definitely put a link up to the Community Foundation there so people can donate. So.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much.
Cool. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good day.
You too. If you enjoy this podcast, there are several ways to support it. I have a Patreon account, which can be found at www.patreon.com/Rob Burgess Show Patreon. I hope you'll consider supporting in any amount. Also, please make sure to comment, follow, like, subscribe, share, rate, and review the podcast everywhere it's available, which includes iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Facebook, Twitter, Internet Archive, TuneIn, and RSS. It really helps. The official website for the podcast is www.therobburgessshow.com. You can find out more about me by visiting my website, www.thisburgess.com. Until next time.